What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Kinda Different, a podcast where we talk about innovation in dental care, connection with our amazing guests, and we talk about how we can make dental care more human. Welcome to episode 5. I'm your host, Matt Allen. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of DifferentKind. Super excited to have with us today Zachary Brian, Zach Brian, who is just really a thoughtful guy, just really someone who is innovating in lots of spaces in dentistry, has a lot of influence in policy, still seeing patients, doing lots of cool work. Really excited to be able to chat with him. So Zach, thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we get started, I would love for you to maybe just introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about where you're working, what your role is, et cetera, right now.
Sure, Matt. So we're a nonprofit based in North Carolina. It's called the North Carolina Oral Health Collaborative. Our parent organization is called the Foundation for Health Leadership and Innovation. We do a lot of work with leadership development of our safety net providers across the state, and we do work more to create systems change through policy reform and payment reform.
Awesome.
I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say I play 2 different roles, in addition to the clinical work in space, but I direct the Oral Health Collaborative, which is a program of the foundation, and then I serve as their vice president for impact strategy and programs.
Perfect. That is an awesome, I mean, I think a lot of people across the country have benefited from the work that you all have been doing in North Carolina, especially throughout COVID. But certainly before that as well, whether they have known it or not, North Carolina has certainly been a leader. I think it really times well with when you arrived there. So certainly grateful for all the work that you've been doing and excited to chat with you more. So obviously, during our time together today, we'll talk about innovation. We'll hear a little bit more about you, help our listeners understand a little bit more what makes you tick. And then we'll talk about making dental care more human, but in the true spirit of including your own decision-making in the process. Do you have a place where you would like to start in terms of one of those 3 categories today?
Yeah, I mean, let's dive in, I think, and focus on the connection piece.
Okay, perfect. I love that. I think that's always a great spot to start. So perfect. One of the questions that I have for you here is just, at DifferentKind, right? We believe that values shape all of our decisions in healthcare, and can and should do that more, in our processes moving forward. So from your perspective, right, what are the values that shape your daily life? Like, what are the things that you wake up saying, hey, this is how I'm going to live my life, and these are the things that I want people to see about me every day?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. I mean, I think for me, really rooting myself in empathy, and making sure that the experiences I've been privileged to experience in my life, even through my patients and different communities I've worked with, that I carry those on. I think it's part of my duty, as in my role, but also as a human being trying to connect with other humans, trying to not just sympathize, but really tap into that empathy compass, that I think all of us have, but sometimes may not know how to further explore or might be afraid to lean into that vulnerability. But I think it's really important when you're in positions like I am and you are, as a clinician, and you're touching so many lives, so many lives that are very vulnerable, and are relying on you to, connect on a human level and not just as a provider-patient relationship. So, a lot of that for me was shaped by my engagement with Indian Health Service when I was in Michigan. Really was able to understand a totally different culture than mine, and empathize truly with the struggles and the barriers that they were facing that were unique, that I would not have experienced myself as a white man.
Totally. I loved, I was listening to a podcast from the Cleveland Clinic recently talking about kind of studies in empathy and a lot of the work that they've done as well. And there was the idea too of we have to move beyond empathy as just putting ourselves in someone else's shoes and really trying to understand that. But how do we act on that information, right? If we aren't able to communicate that empathy, if we aren't able to effectively demonstrate that empathy, if we just kind of, have the same demeanor, whatever, wow, yeah, I feel that deeply, but I'm not actively showing that or not doing anything about it. I think that that's really such an interesting step in taking what you just said, right, and helping those people that we're working with, or whoever we're talking to, patients or just friends in life or whatever, right, understand that we have that empathy.
Yeah, and Matt, I think it's really topical right now, particularly as so many of our communities are experiencing empathy fatigue. They're really kind of tapped out and not being able to refill their own cup, and so sometimes that creates barriers to be able to authentically empathize with others to the extent you're mentioning, not just putting yourself in their shoes, but really trying to emote that and create those connections through empathy.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, I right there with you. I love that value shaping your daily life, and certainly you are a very empathetic person. I've always felt that from you, and if any of our listeners know you or get the chance to interact with you, I'm certain they will feel that as well. Thinking about kind of moving, obviously we're going to talk about innovation and kind of, hey, where's the dental field going, and what do you see, and how are you looking at that? I think we all look to people who are inspiring us or whatever. Who might be inspiring to you right now? Could be oral health related, doesn't have to be, but who are you looking to and saying, wow, I'm finding a lot of inspiration from this person right now?
My gosh, definitely, without a doubt, I would say Mary Otto. So folks may know her as the journalist and the author of the book Teeth. A shameless plug. If you have not read the book Teeth, please do so. But one of the things that really has struck me about Mary's work is how much it has impacted my career, not just my current role, but often, Matt, as you know, so many times we're not authentically providing a platform for the consumer of care's voice, or the patient's voice, the person's voice, not just as a consumer of care, really, but as a human being. And for me, I think that's what Mary does. She provides that platform to not extract information from others, but to give the platform in an authentic way and help them feel comfortable, sharing their own story. And those are the stories that need to be told. They're not always comfortable stories. And I always say, if you don't squirm a little bit, hearing about what some of the true struggles are that folks face in this country and around the world, then we're not doing our part as humanity to take risks. And so, she's unafraid to take risks. She's unafraid to tackle big systemic challenges. I recently had an opportunity to host her in North Carolina. She was so gracious to come down and spend some time with us. She was actually here to do a book signing. But did I mention I love her book? But
check it out.
I know, right? But one of the things when you have an idol, right? You never know how things are going to pan out when you actually meet them in person. I've seen her in webinars. I've read her journalistic, pieces in different outlets across the country. But when I met her, she is truly who I thought she would be or hoped she would be.
Yeah.
That always doesn't pan out, right?
Yep.
But she did not present herself as Mary, the successful author, right? She was Mary, a human being. I think that she was very vulnerable with us, and I encourage everyone, to not be afraid to be vulnerable and take risks, and no matter where you're at in your career, because I think it pays off in the end, and she's done some amazing work. So she inspires me every day.
I love it. There's so much there. Would also highly recommend her book. Really, really excellent. So yes, I want to go back and listen to that again already, what you just said, because I feel like there's so many lessons, even just in that little clip from you right there. So that's awesome. Well, kind of, in terms of not being afraid and moving forward in innovation, right? Maybe we can touch on that category next. You've obviously been innovating a lot, doing a lot of really impressive and important work in North Carolina over the last number of years. What are you most excited to be working on right now? Like, what's something that you're real pumped on to say, yeah, I'm excited to be working on this project, and here's, what I hope the impact will be?
Matt, I would first say you're creating a high bar. I appreciate the kind words. I want to first acknowledge, it's what I'm going to talk about really was a collaborative effort. And, we're called the Oral Health Collaborative for a reason. It's not just a name only, but I would not be accomplishing this work without our coalition and all the team members, and the diverse perspectives and voices. So I want to first, just give a shout out to all of them. But one of the things that we're working on that I'm very excited about is, as you know, some states have transitioned their Medicaid programs to managed care models, and often oral health is carved out. And that's the case in North Carolina. So we were able as a state to move our primary care and behavioral health care services into a Medicaid managed care model, but oral health has remained carved out. For various reasons, and kind of reading the tea leaves, so to speak, we do anticipate, that value-based care is the future of oral health, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we effectively build systems, which is part of our work with the collaborative, to ensure value? And value means different things to different people. So that's step one, right? Creating a common definition. But we partner with the Institute of Medicine in our state to launch a North Carolina Medicaid Transformation Initiative, which is a roughly 2-year, 3-phase process to actually learn from other states. So do some cross-state modeling, dive deeply into the research, hear from consumers, hear from providers in other states and in North Carolina, and then make some recommendations. It's a task force essentially that will be made up of a very broad swath of individuals that represent different key constituency groups to talk about if right, oral health has to be carved into managed care at some point in our state. What should those MCO contracts look like? How do we ensure quality? How do we ensure whole person health? How do we further integrate oral health into the broader healthcare system? Those are questions that we're going to dive in strategically as a group to address. And what I find the beauty of this is how diverse it's been built in terms of perspective, lived experience, and the final product will be a recommendation document provided to our General Assembly and to our Department of Health and Human Services to say, hey, if oral health is carved into managed care at some point in the future, here are the things that your key stakeholders across the state felt were very necessary for you to pay attention to ensure go into those contracts to make sure that we're most effectively meeting the needs of our community. So I'm super pumped about it.
Yeah, holy cow. That's, so important for the future of, what oral health payment can look like, right? And I think whatever the answers to those questions are, we need to be asking those questions. And it's so, so important that you're doing it. And I love that talking about the consumer voice in that process as well, right? That's another question that I kind of want to get your perspective on, because I do think you're able to engage such a diverse coalition of people through your work in North Carolina. And so, when you look at patients and people, right, just in general, patients are just people who are in a healthcare setting generally, right? What do you see as patients' role in innovation? Maybe from like a best practices perspective, 2 or 3 best practices that you could say, hey, look, like I tend to see this working really well. And then maybe from an aspirational perspective too of, hey, if I could have everything I wanted, here's what I think that would look like ideally.
Gosh, well, I first have to say, in my opinion, that the patient is part of the care team. So we often think of the care team as the dentist, the dental hygienist, maybe the assistant, and others, but the patient is why we're there, right? The patient is part of the care team. And so one of the things I often see, unfortunately, is that there's this power dynamic and patients, their voice really isn't heard authentically, and we're missing opportunities. So best practice to me, is making sure that you are listening to patients. At the end of the day, it is their health. You're there to help and inform them, right? Or co-draft some treatment plans with them. But at the end of the day, they are the person that will decide the treatment that they want, they value, they feel they need. And you have to respect that. And so particularly as we shift to value-based care, as I mentioned earlier, the patient experience will be so critically important. And we've already seen it play out, how the patient perspective has already helped innovate. So think about just recently with care coordination and case management codes. So when you listen to patients and you understand the barriers that they truly have, they will help guide you of how to create systems change to really impact and support the needs that they have. So we can't just assume we know what issues are in the system. We have to listen to our patients to understand that. And they directly, I think push forward this idea of care coordination, case management, not a novel idea, right? So I want to say that and acknowledge, medicine's been doing this for quite some time. Dentistry is often behind the curve. But in thinking about how, another example is how patients want to access their healthcare. So think about teledentistry and the innovation that patients have helped drive in that space of telehealth. So, at the center of innovation is the patient. Why are we innovating? It's for the patient. It's not for ourselves. It's for the patient and the people we're serving.
Yep.
So until we authentically lean in and listen and actually let them guide us, we're gonna miss the boat.
Totally. And I feel like you do such a great job of that in North Carolina. And, I talk a lot about how, as a clinician, right, we don't want to provide care on or to patients, certainly. But, even providing care for patients, right, that misses the kind of co-design mark. It misses the co-production mark. We want to do it with patients, right? And I think you do that from a systems level with patients, right, of really listening to those diverse stakeholder perspectives and saying, hey, look, this is how we can move forward together, not how I'm going to move forward for you, even if I'm listening to your perspective, right? And I truly respect that. All right. One of the things that I love hearing your opinion on, because I think you have a really interesting perspective on, is dental education. So as we talk about making dental care more human, to kind of have a couple questions in that category for you. You're involved with ADIA, right? You can tell us about that involvement, exactly how that looks. But when you think about changing dental education to make it more human, what ideas do you have? What can we do? What's some, maybe not even low hanging fruit, but just some like, hey, here are ways that we can move forward. I think a lot of times we say, oh yeah, we could do this. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of roping it in, but not really, right? What are some things that we can do to move forward in that space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really is teaching, young professionals how to really promote person-centered care. So I want to hope that everyone strikes patient-centered care from their vocabulary, because patients are who come through the door, but people are who sit in the chair and actually we deliver care to and help. So person-centered care. And I think one way to do that is exposing students to service learning opportunities, but not in the sense of like, I'm going to let you do one rotation out in community and show you community dentistry, right, versus regular dentistry. We don't want to perpetuate those silos and misunderstandings. But it's a way for us to really connect the patient and the provider. So those young providers understand that it's not just clinical challenges, that their patients are facing, it's social and economic challenges. Connecting with them again on a human level, not just as a provider-patient relationship, I think is really important. And there are ways to do that by giving them the platform to engage more authentically with their patients, not just in the dental chair. So one of the things that I've seen others do is really give the students an opportunity to meet patients in the community where they live, work, and play, and get to know them. And there have been a couple of studies on this that have been really interesting to show how much trust is built outside of the four walls of a dental office. So it teaches students how and what is the imperative for them to be civilly connected outside of just providing clinical services, right? So dentists are people too. So are you out in the community? Are you meeting with the community itself? Are you a member of the community, at different events? So it's important. And I think that that's one way that I've seen, some movement. The other thing I would say is, providing students an opportunity to fail. So often we think of students' competency as just, can they perform a procedure? Are we actually evaluating them on how they interact with patients and what the patient experiences after their engagement with them? No, we're not doing that as a core competency, but we should be doing that, because we're not robots, right? We're not here to just provide a clinical service, wham, bam, you're done, goodbye, see you in 6 months. No, that's not what we're doing. Like, we need to make sure we're connecting the dots for whole person health. And that includes really understanding your patient's barriers, not just orally, but economically, socially, et cetera.
Yeah, man. Well, and it's such an interesting thing, right? To measure that longitudinally, right? It's like one thing to say, hey, we're going to take this class on cutting this kind of prep, or we're going to take this class on making dentures or whatever. And then can you produce that at the end? But, I think an interesting question is, can you become a more empathetic person throughout the course of your training in school? And, what are the skills that you need to actually develop to do that? I think that's a fascinating question. And, I don't know if that's exactly what you're saying, but certainly a question that I'm asking in this space as well. So I love what you have to say there. Lastly, give us something that you think when it comes to patient experience. So you've talked a lot about patient experience in general. What's something that you think is overlooked right now, but really important, something that we should be paying more attention to? That could be from a policy lens, that could be from a clinical lens, that could be from whatever, but what's something that you think is overlooked, but really important?
It's simple, Matt, definitely simple. Where is the table, the proverbial table we talk about patients having a seat at when policy decisions are made? Do they actually have a seat? Because I'm not sure when I'm in meetings with key legislators or other influencers, there's anyone that is the consumer of care at that table. So why aren't they at that table? Let's start there. Let's ask that question. And I think that their experiences directly, as we went back to and asked the question earlier about innovation, they have amazing ideas of how to address their unique challenges, their community's unique challenges. But we have to make sure that we give them the space to be able to voice those issues and offer solutions. Mm-hmm. So communities know their challenges best and let them drive the solutions. So it's overlooked in that they're not at the table. They're not there. They're not consulted. And again, we create a system in which we think will address their needs, not really understanding truly what their needs are.
Totally. And man, I feel like legislators want to hear those patient stories, but I also feel like legislators need to want to hear patient ideas for solutions. And I think that that's what you just said right there, right? Of like, they need to be able to offer solutions as well. Because generally people know, hey, when you give them the option of, hey, what might change this for you? What might solve this for you? They have really interesting and fascinating ideas that tend to work, right? So it's not just listen to your stories, it's move beyond that and allow them to offer solutions. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, in the interest of time, we always try to keep these relatively short so you can listen to on one commute or whatever it might be. Zach, if people want to connect more with your work, with you, with what you all are doing in North Carolina, give us where we might find that on the interwebs. Tell us where to go and how to connect.
Yeah, Matt, thanks. So you guys can look me up on LinkedIn. Definitely very active there. In terms of our organization, our program, you can find us at oralhealthnc.org. All of our content is there. Follow us on all the social media platforms, Oral Health NC, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. We try to release what we feel is unique content that we don't see in the oral health space being released. And a lot of it does center around this community voice perspective that you've heard me kind of intertwine most of my responses with today. But Matt, I want to thank you again just for what DifferentKind is doing. I think it's such an amazing company. And also for launching this podcast. I think this is super cool. I've been able to listen to a couple of the episodes so far. I cannot wait to listen to the rest of them. But thanks for having me on.
No, Zach, thank you so much for being a part of it. We're grateful for you. We're grateful for your work. Keep on fighting that good fight in North Carolina. Thanks for taking the time to join us today, and look forward to continue watching you innovate down there in North Carolina.
Thanks, Matt.